Hello, my name's Ken Kinter, and I'm an assistant professor at Rutgers University. The purpose of this video, it's the third in a series of videos regarding group facilitation. I definitely recommend you catch the first two before catching this one, although this one is a little more specific and independent. Definitely recommend catching those first two either way. This one is geared specifically towards social skills groups for people with severe and persistent mental illness. As always, my contact information is on the bottom of this slide. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or anything about the material that I discuss. Before I get rolling, I want to give credit where credit is due. The project that I work for and have worked for over 13 years is called the State Hospital Psychiatric Rehabilitation Initiative. It's a joint effort between Rutgers University and the New Jersey Department of Health. Their financial support and other types of support as well make our mission possible, which is to improve the quality of care and also the quality of the working conditions at New Jersey state psychiatric hospitals. It simply would not be possible without them, so we are grateful for their support. So we're going to talk about today, as the previous two videos, we talked about aspects of groups in general. We're going to get a little more specific in terms of a specific type of group for specific populations. So the type of group are social skills groups. We're going to talk about why social skills groups are helpful, being able to assess them, document them, plan them, deal with the problems that come up with them, which are many. We're going to talk about addictions to a certain degree as well, because that ties in with this as well, and also gives you some additional resources or places to go. There's no way one video makes you an expert, but hopefully this is either a review for you or a good starting point. We can also guide you to some resources that will help you as well. All right, busy slides, I apologize, but we'll talk over it quickly. So social skills are just basically our skills that we have with different people, interactions with other people. We are social animals, and we have lots of contact with other people. Now, the social skills that we have fit into a couple different categories. The first category is receptive skills. These are the cues we get from outside, how perceptive we are about what's going on around us. And that encompasses being able to interpret incoming information, how other people see us. How do we interpret these visual and other cues we get from other people? Some of them are verbal, some of them are nonverbal. How good are we at catching that hint? The next one is the expressive, the outgoing. What I say, what I do, how I say it, the distance with which I say it, and that's where this proxemics part comes in. If I try speaking to you and I am right on top of you, you might not listen as well because you're going to be too concerned with my proximity rather than what I'm saying. So receptive is how I deal with the incoming, expressive is the outgoing, and then in addition to that, we have situational skills that are specific to a certain thing. Dating, assertiveness, things like job interviews, things like speaking to a psychiatrist about medication, being able to advocate for oneself. So I am sure that we have our own type of social skills. Meeting new people is another example. So I'm sure we have these situational skills that some of us are more and less comfortable with. Now, the question comes up, and it's a good question. Why are social skills groups even necessary? Why are we teaching adult social skills? Well, there's two real reasons. One is that social skills are a moving target. They're changing all the time. I did not grow up knowing what Facebook etiquette was because Facebook didn't exist. And then we have Instagram and we have all these other things. And social skills have changed quite a bit. I'm recording this in the middle of a pandemic where appropriate social distance is now at least 6 feet. That wasn't always the case. So these things are a moving target. So it's not like you can just write a book saying social skills and here they are. The other significant reason is when someone suffers a significant illness or addiction, their social growth is affected. And it's affected for a number of reasons. The illness may affect their brain development if it hits during a young age, like much mental illness does. There may be less of a motivation to be social because the outside world might be scary, or there may be fear of it aggravating the illness. There may be environmental aspects of it. If the person is in an impoverished situation, maybe the surrounding world is not safe for them. There may be challenges in terms of problem-solving skills. There may be problems in terms of memory. Um, there may also be positive and negative symptoms that interfere. The other things that we see in there are, if someone is very ill, the primary focus of their life is treatment. So all of those other things don't necessarily get to happen. The example I give is a boy I went to high school with was diagnosed with cancer in his junior year of high school. And I noticed that all of the things that he was interested in kind of fell away because his primary motivation, and rightly so, was to get well. So girlfriends, cars, music, all the stuff he had been into, he pulled back from because his life was about getting well, which he did. However, what was the opportunity cost of that? So that happens. And then there's and I'm talking about someone with a medical illness. Then let's throw on the added stigma of mental illness and addiction, and you have that as well. So what happens is, and this is kind of common in the addictions literature, the age where someone comes down with an addiction or a mental illness, there's part of them that stays at or near that age. And we all know people who are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who act very much like teenagers or children because that was when their social skills growth was inhibited. So while they were sick, while they were in the hospital, while they were dealing with all these other things, they didn't have a chance to move forward in this area. And now here we are. If you ever want to see an illustration of this, a Hollywood illustration of this, watch the movie Awakenings, Robin Williams and Robert De Niro. I don't want to give the story away, but it talks about what I'm saying, and it's a great movie. So we'll go from there. So the other why of social skills training is let's teach people new skills. They will retain these skills. They'll be able to generalize these skills to other skills. And this all leads to someone having a more independent, fulfilling life, because isolation makes everything worse, whether it's a physical illness, a mental illness, or an addiction. And then the other part is the more independent, the more locked into life someone is, we find that there's a positive impact regarding their symptoms and their relapses. The more connected they are, the better their safety net is. And then hopefully that keeps them out of that loop of hospitalization and incarceration and all that other good stuff that comes along with it. So the first thing we need to do is assess someone's social skills. So how do we do that? So we look at where their problems are. Where are their problems in their social functioning? Are they good in some areas, not good in others? Are they bad in areas overall? Are they not acting in, what we consider an adult or age-appropriate manner? What are the circumstances in which that problem occurs? Is it someone who's really good until they have to stand up for themselves? What do we think the cause of the problem is? Because there's a difference whether it's symptomatic, neurological, behavioral. Where is this coming from so that we can address this? And if the person does have a social skills problem, what type of deficit is it? Is it an expressive situation? Do they say everything they say at full volume? Is it receptive? Do they miss the cue when someone doesn't want to talk to them anymore or wants to go away? Is it a problem with interaction? Or is it there's a specific situation that a person just doesn't do very well in? So more about the assessment. I didn't know this starting out, that the root of the word assessment means to sit beside. I like that. That's as good a form as assessment as any, right? So what you want to have a multi-dimensional effect. You want to interview somebody, but you need to see it also, either formally or informally, where you see them actually trying to do the thing and failing, or you just see them in their normal interactions. You might want to do role plays with them. Let's just mock this out and just see how it goes. And then you can see it in a simulated situation. You want to interview the person. You want to interview people around them, get the benefit of their experience, and get their look at their interpersonal relations going back, as far as you can. There are also, and this is in the book that we'll talk about at the end, there are checklists that you can use where you can clock these things over time and watch that person's progress. Also, when doing the assessment, you want to start with the general skills and then move into the specific. What general area do they struggle with, and then find out where that specific thing actually is. You also want to find out how it's impacting their role functioning and how it's stopping them from achieving their goals, because that's where the motivation comes from to change it. If they acknowledge that this thing is in the way of what they want to do, then you're going to have some traction for change. So documentation, we love documentation, right? So this is just a quick and dirty list of, you maybe have your own version of this where you work, but these are the pieces of information that you want to capture. You want to capture the date of session, what the goal of that session was, what was taught, whether role plays were done and how many. And then you have this little almost Likert-ish rating scale about attentiveness, cooperativeness, performance, whether they got homework done. So you can, it's almost like little marker buoys where you can catch that person's progress over time. Where are they making progress? Where aren't they making progress? That's probably also very good if you work somewhere where you get reimbursed because they want to see that there's some progress as well. So the steps to a social skills group. Now, again, if you've seen the first video in this series, we go into this in a lot more detail, but just to touch base on it again, the first step of group, review the rules and expectations, provide the rationale for the group and what's going to happen, introduce new group members, introduce the skill to be taught, the structure and pace of session, and do everything with tell, show, do. Tell someone about what you're going to do, show it, perhaps in a role play, and then have them do it. Model skills and participate in the role plays, process all feedback and exercises, and then homework to do in between sessions. In video number 2, we talk about the timing aspect of this as to how you can work all this out in each session. So that's also good to catch. So some of the learning behind these types of groups is Bandura's social learning theory. And there's a lot of different aspects to this. And this is one of the advantages of the group. People not only learn from the facilitator, but they learn actually more from their peers. Now, you as the facilitator, model good social behavior. You want to be a role model for that person to follow. And you can do that by engaging them in role plays. Also, a very neat tactic is bad role modeling. If you put right out in advance that you are going to be a bad role model, then they get an opportunity to be a better role model. Not perfect, but better. So there's a real tactic in, I'm going to do this wrong and I want you to do it better than I did it. Other aspects, reinforcement, shaping successive approximations. They didn't get exactly where they wanted to get, but they got one step closer, and that's good enough. Overlearning and repetition, generalizing so that people can use a skill that you've taught them in other ways, and also coaching. So you have them do something, but you can always call a timeout and pause and give them feedback and help them with it going forward. Social learning theory also has a lot to do with vicarious learning, where people learn from what they see other people learning and doing in the group. So everyone helps everyone. That's part of the foundation of the group. So when you're planning a group, and again, video 1 has this in much better detail, but these are the questions you want to have answered. If you are running a group and there's paperwork for you, which I hope there will be, to help you run the group, these are the questions that should be answered. And I'm not going to ask all of them. There are way too many. But these questions should all be answered before you start the group. And if you are going to plan a group, you should have answers for all of these questions. And it has everything to do from purpose to goals, to clients, to screening, to the rules, the whole thing. Have to plan it before you do it. This is the blueprint before the house gets built. If there's no blueprint, the house is probably not going to stand up very well. So this is what we hope happens. What we hope happens is that your clients have something in common in terms of their functioning, that they have something in common that brings them to the group, that you have a reasonable number of people in the group, the purpose and type of group are very clear, you have the appropriate duration, that it's good for the setting and the timing, that we have a good group facilitator who not only has all these characteristics that we mentioned here, but also knowledge of motivational interviewing, that's MI, and all these other aspects as well. Now, as we know, we frequently do not live in a perfect world, so sometimes we have to compensate for these. What are we going to do if the group's really big? What are we going to do if the groups at a really bad time of day? So we have to compensate for all of the imperfections that happen. Again, this is covered much better in the first group facilitation video. If you are creating a group, you start with a curriculum menu, which is a list of all of the content that you want to cover during the course of this entire group series. Then that yields a group protocol. And that's one sheet that's an overview of all the things that are going to happen in all the groups from beginning to end. And then each session has a lesson plan, one at a time, that you or someone else can go off of to replicate that group. Again, the content of group protocol and lesson plan is covered in video 1 much better. So the important part is tailoring the group to the individuals. You will never run the exact same group twice, and that's a good thing. And then when you start a group, then that helps you. That's also part of the assessment process, where you figure, how do you make it more specific? How do you make it work? Do homework assignments not work particularly well? Do role plays work better? Do you have to speed up or slow down the material to compensate for your audience? I did 2 groups in a jail: minimum security, maximum security. Maximum security group was very smart and they moved very quickly. Something maybe about the criminal mind there, I'm not sure. The minimum security, much less severe crimes, bad decision makers, many more cognitive deficits, really struggled to get through the material. So I thought I was running the same group twice in a row with different people, and it turned out to be completely mistaken. So here's some of the challenges. Some people don't like doing role plays. Some people are very uncomfortable doing role plays. And unfortunately, the best cure for reluctance to do role plays is doing lots of role plays. And you basically get them thrashed out. It's the best way to learn. Problems with attendance, problems with homework. You have a whole list of all sorts of issues here that you will be dealing with. You could theoretically deal with everything on this list in a single group, in which case you look like our little friend here, our little stressed friend on the slide. There are also some issues with some specific populations that may be challenging. Older population may be more difficult, might take longer to get people together. They may have some difficulty visually with reading materials. If you know you have an older population, you may need to make accommodations to make that work. There may be more storytelling. There may be much more repetition, for example. People with intellectual disabilities, some of these things are going to be similar. Learn well through telling stories. There may be a lot of repetition. There may need to be a strong entertainment component to keep people's attention. And they may have a difficult time generalizing skills from one area to another because of their cognitive deficits. The forensic population may challenge your authority right off the bat. They may not want to hear what you have to say. May not be good, as I mentioned before, the people who were minimum security in the jail made terrible decisions. They weren't good criminals, but they continually sabotaged themselves. And the hierarchy I've noticed in forensic populations, the hierarchy is pretty serious. You end up having to fight that in group, that all members are equal, because in forensic facilities, there's definitely a hierarchy going on. With a younger population, there's a frustration threshold to be dealt with, getting and keeping their attention, getting them to problem solve better, and they get bored really easy. So it's entirely possible that some of these groups of people you might be better or worse at working with. And it's better if you work with a population that you have a better connection with. But know that even if you're running the exact same group with these different populations, you're going to make changes. Even the length of group might be different. You might have to do a shorter group with a younger population or a geriatric population, because that's just all the attention span you're going to get. So the other benefits of the social skills group, specifically when it comes to addiction adds a couple more dimensions to it. And again, to my knowledge, most of the people that have a severe and persistent mental illness have an addiction going along with them, at least one. So that becomes an additional challenge, because now you have the symptoms that they're dealing with psychiatrically, but then you also have these addiction issues as well. And as one addiction moves out, there's a challenge with another one moving right in the door. New Jersey, where I work, has what they call a no wrong door principle, which is we don't separate people with addictions from people with mental illness. Again, it's mostly the same people, but even then it doesn't do well to separate. Definitely encourage you catching the videos on stages of change and motivational interviewing that are geared very well, not only to people with mental illness, but also to people with addictions. And some specialized training on addictions wouldn't be a bad idea either. There's something called the behavioral treatment for substance abuse and severe and persistent mental illness. The details of this are in the book that I'm going to describe at the end. However, I thought it was worth mentioning. It's a 6-month group treatment. It focuses on specific situations, role-playing situations where a person might be tempted to use. I know one of my colleagues has role-played being a drug dealer so many times that she's actually really good at it now. It's not abstinence mandatory. In fact, a person doesn't even have to want to quit. They might just be there for informational purposes, but there's a lot of skill training involved. Again, when do addictions start? Teens, preteens, and all that time where that person spends in addiction was not spent learning healthy social skills. In fact, the only relationships they may have may be drug friends. So there's a lot of unlearning that needs to do before the learning happens. So some closing tips on this is, again, watch your colleagues, see what they do well and what they don't. It's great to have people sit in and watch what they do. If there's someone who's been doing this for a long time, or they really look like they know what they're doing, watch them. Be a complete and total sponge. Get in a group on your own. For those of you who work with addictions, I would recommend attending an open 12-step meeting. Open meaning it's open to visitors and people that may be non-addicts. You will see what works and what doesn't in a group setting there. Or to get in a group if you've got your own stuff, go to a group for that. Persistence and positive reinforcement are key. Never underestimate cognitive deficits. They're a real challenge to work with in group. Don't work in isolation. Don't ever be afraid to reach out to your clients and ask them whether things are working and what they like and what they don't like. And don't hesitate to reach out to your colleagues about what works. Someone of your colleagues has an answer to the questions and the problems you're having, I guarantee it. This is more about teaching than training. There's a lot more of a support piece going on to it. And teaching is a little more comprehensive than just training about a specific thing. Build stress management in as well, because change is very stressful. Part of the reason why a person may have not developed social skills is because once you're aware that you're behind, then there's this fear and shame piece, and there's this pressure to pretend that you don't know any different. So part of what you're going to be building in is how can we create a safe, relaxing environment where people feel safe admitting or displaying that they have some skills deficits, and then also learning how to make those up. Again, there's nothing great about somebody in their 20s, 30s, and 40s finally learning how to ask a guy or a girl out on a date because they've never had the opportunity before. All right, summary of what we've covered so far. Social skills involves dealing with other people, the receptive skills coming in, the expressive skills going out, and situation-specific skills. People with mental illness, addictions, and severe medical issues develop social skills deficits. It's just not a priority. Assessment should be targeted and multidimensional. Again, diagnose something before you take it on. Documenting social skills groups is critical so that you know the person's making progress, so that the person themselves knows they're making progress, and the people that reimburse you know that they're making progress. As with all groups, planning is critical. No planning, no good group. That's pretty much how that works. You have to tailor the group to the individual and the setting involved. So even if you think you've got it right at the gate, you're going to end up doing it again, tweaking it to make it work for your people. Addiction adds a whole other dimension to this aspect, as we talked about before, and maybe a whole other level of resistance as well. Would also definitely recommend that you get all the additional support and resources that you can. Group can be very helpful, can be very beneficial. It can also be very excruciating for the facilitator and the participants if it isn't going well. So as I talked about before, these are some great resources. Most of what we talked about today in this video comes out of this Bellac book, The Social Skills Training for Schizophrenia. And again, the back half of the book are all sample groups for all sorts of social skills situations. If you run a social skills group, chances are this book probably has better materials in it for how to run a social skills group than what you have where you work. I would definitely make the investment in it. Corey is also really good in terms of group, and there's his video Groups in Action is also very helpful. I mentioned the Jacobs book, and that also has some great videos with it as well. And Yalom is one of the founding books in the field of group therapy. It's a little dated, but it's a classic. And it's available used everywhere because everyone has one. If you liked this video, the website at the bottom, this is where the repository for where all our videos are, including the first 2 videos in this series. There may be other videos being made to follow as well. Anyway, I thank you for your time and your attention. Hope to talk to you again real soon. Take care. Bye-bye.